Hi everyone, I'm Mickey Feldman Simon. I'm the founder of I'm Back at Work, and I'd like to welcome you here today to the webinar Resume Tips from the Experts with Robin Schwartz. And I hope that you also join us for the upcoming webinars that we have, and also browse through all the webinars we have on the website on I'mBackAtWork.com that are on demand. Now, before we get started and before I pass it on to Robin, I want to make sure that you can use the webinar panel. So currently on your screen, you either have the webinar panel looking either like the image on the right when it is closed, or the image on the left when it's expanded. And to open and close the webinar panel, you click on the orange arrow at the top. Either there you would open it up, and if you click on it when it's opened up, it will close it up. Now you can also drag the webinar panel out of the way. It may be obstructing the presentation at the moment. So you click at the top there, there's like little gray lines. You just click there and you move it, drag it out of the way. Now, in the last 5 minutes of the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. And to ask your questions, you should click on the gray questions bar with on the left-hand side when the webinar panel is open. So when you click on the gray questions bar, it will open up, and then you can type your questions. You can type your questions in the blue rectangle underneath. So the blue rectangle is where you type in your questions, and we will address them at the end of the webinar. Now I'm very excited to pass it on to Robin Schwartz. She's an accredited resume writer, and I'm going to turn my video camera off so that you can concentrate on the presentation.
Hi, thank you for coming to the webinar today. My name is Robin Schwartz. I'm a mastery level resume writer. I hold a postmaster certificate in school counseling from the University of Minnesota and my master's in human services from Capella. Back in the day, I received my bachelor's from Columbia. I'm a former stay-at-home mom, a former college level instructor, a current entrepreneur, and what I love doing is empowering individuals to go after their dreams and find their voices. I'm gonna shut off my camera now so you can concentrate on the performance, on the presentation. Okay. Thank you for joining me today. Just to go over our plan for our presentation today, I just gave you my introduction. We're going to discuss how resumes have changed over the years. We're going to discuss how resumes have changed. We're going to discuss parts of a resume, how to present your information smartly and in a bite-sized manner, what exactly an infographic is, you might have heard this term, strategies specifically for stay-at-home moms returning to work, how to give your real-life experience context and meaning and relevance in your job hunt, what exactly is too much information to share, and some next steps for you to follow. So you remember your old resume. You may have it in some sort of old Word file. Your resume had a short objective. It was always presented in chronological order. It had little to no personalization, and it had to be one page. You might have remembered trying to figure out what experience you were going to omit or how exactly to get that resume to one page. And on the very bottom, it listed your skills. This is how the old resume used to look. The objective, the experience, very generic, very based in actual tasks and not necessarily in impact. Your education on the bottom and then your skills. Well, it's 2017 and it's changed. The resumes today are very high touch. They're not generic, they're hard-hitting, they don't mince words. The goal of a resume is you hit them on top with everything that you have, and then you spend the rest of the resume showing the results. You don't want a resume, your resume to be an exercise in having to search for data, for information and qualifications. You'd like to have the hiring manager just see it and to come, and your credentials to come glaring at them. And resumes actually don't have to be black and white. They can have a little bit of color. They just need to be tasteful and appropriate for your industry. So let's talk a little bit more about how resumes and how they have changed. Many resumes today begin with a tagline, then they have a headline and/or professional summary. I want to stress that in resume writing, there really are no rules per se, and no two resumes are the same. When I write a resume, I often skip a tagline or a headline. It's really a personal judgment. A tagline is akin to your personal branding statement. How do you want to be branded? A headline is more of a direction. It gives you a bit more details and probably talks about the job that you were targeting. And professional summary is a top-level description of your skills. I wanted to share this specific example with you. I like this resume I like this beginning very much. You don't always have to show your address. In 2017, most people are just showing their city, state, and zip code. The zip code is very important, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. I really do like this resume because her target is very clear. You can tell she wants to be a flight attendant, and she has a great branding statement, bringing passion to provide excellent customer service on board. Her summary, in a few lines, explains what her skill set is. She has a 7-year track record of exceptional services to passengers to the destinations, and she's well versed in all pre and post flight checks. And professional highlights explain more what her expertise is. Note that we haven't mentioned an employer yet. We're focusing on her skills. Front and center is her bilingual experience. If your second language will help you get the job, it should be mentioned as soon as possible on your resume. Here's some examples of branding statements, the taglines we discussed. Usually they're a noun surrounded by some adjectives that explain that you're the expert in some witty and clever way. Another way of looking at these taglines is that they're actually solutions. Often people are hired because they solve a current problem. For example, the executive assistant who keeps you organized. The social worker who solves problems. The marketing expert who knows everything. The last example I wanted to share was actually all adjectives. It was for an investment banker, investment researcher, and she wanted to be considered because she was extremely selective, thorough, and thoughtful, and she felt those 3 adjectives would set her apart right off the bat in any job search. I'm happy to say she actually just got her dream job yesterday. It sets you apart in a quick way. Again, we're not searching for data. You're setting your brand up immediately upon the beginning of the resume. Headlines giving context. A headline is the former objective. This is where you state your targeted position and give the context for it. Here are some examples. The first example I want to share with you is the top example. It's for a recent criminal justice graduate who has a diverse and empowering background, which basically means she's probably a little bit older. She's probably been out of school a bit, and she has work experience. And she's targeting an entry-level loss prevention specialist position. this sounds like a strong candidate, and her qualifications are fairly clear. The second example leads off with the fact that this medical administrator is bilingual with proven skills, a proven bilingual medical administrator with recent healthcare administration degree. Again, the top qualifications are in the first line. The second line includes that he's qualified for a practice management or patient services position, and he's targeting a private practice or hospital setting. Within the first 2 lines of the resume, the goal and the top line qualifications of this applicant become clear. The next next headline I want to include was a more experienced candidate. This was for a corporate attorney. She wants to set herself apart as corporate counsel. It's very clear that she's an astute corporate contract negotiator, and she's proactively managing and identifying legal issues while remaining customer-centric. What I want to focus on here is that she's a customer-centric person who understands the business world. I also want to focus that she gets the big picture. Often lawyers are focused on small details, which is important, but in a corporate setting, there's another set of skills and instincts that are needed, and she has them. The final example is actually a project manager who received the first job she applied to with the resume. This was an assistant project manager who actually by trade is a lawyer, and she was looking for a position. What makes her so attractive and what makes this background so strong is that we explain that she's experienced and she can make an immediate contribution to a team. That's telling the hiring manager she doesn't need training, that she has experience, that she's a strong legal background. This is really someone who has skills in the area of real estate project management and can hit the ground running. Too often, employers don't want to take the time to train, and they want someone who can hit the ground running. They also want someone who could think strategically, so I added here, demonstrate strategic thinking. The next is a professional summary. I would like you to note that I still have not mentioned the employer at all. With this senior corporate resume, the applicant had years of experience in telecommunications, but was now looking to move to a different field. So I sort of hid in the 6th line that they had some possible telecommunications experience, but I really want to focus on more of the operational experience and not necessarily the industry that she's been involved with. I want to focus the reader and boil it down to 3 examples of her skills and give clear, three different skill sets and give clear examples to what they were. It's important when someone's returning to work that they focus on the skills they have and not necessarily the settings that they've been in, because those settings have changed over the years. If you note the professional summary, it's clean and crisp. I've taken a lot of care to make sure that it's not overly wordy and it's clear for anyone who's trying to understand it. So I want to give another example of what a professional summary, sorry. There's 2 examples of some additional professional summaries. This is back to our project manager who got the first job she applied to. This is her description that we looked at earlier. The next part of her professional summary, I just listed out her skills. You may be wondering why exactly I did that. The reason why is something called an automatic tracking system, affectionately called an ATS. It used to be that an ATS, big companies used to use them to screen out the applicants who sent resumes in. ATSs are programmed with the job description, and they'll only show to an HR manager resumes that maybe hit 65% skills match to what exactly they're looking for. What that means is your resume did not get read by a human unless it seemed like you were qualified for unless it seemed like to the computer you were qualified for the job. That software has gotten a lot less expensive, and as a result, smaller and more organizations are using ATS systems to weed out candidates. One way of getting past an ATS is listing your skills straight out in the beginning of the resume so people can see what you're qualified to do. You'll explain it throughout the resume how you've gained these skills and what you've done with these skills, but it's important, it may be important for you to list out your skills straight out in black and white. Also, please note how I've actually organized the skills. They're organized in 3 different categories: project management skills, property management skills, and computer skills. It's very clear what computer programs she knows, her property management skills, and her project management skills. The second summary I wanted to share was a good example because, first of all, it's in first person. Professional summaries should be in first person. Different parts of the resumes tend to be in different persons. It talks about her top skills and how they directly impact the bottom line. Often with a resume, if someone who has a lot of experience, they could come into a professional summary and say that they've done $300,000 worth of sales or $1 million worth of sales and really emphasize numbers. When you've been out of the workforce for a while, you may not have those numbers anymore. They may not be available to you. So you still want to show that you have had impact on the bottom line of the organization and compliant with industry standards. So the first example is provide insight into sales, revenue forecasting, and pricing by creating analytical financial reports. This is how you can most easily and most readily contribute to an organization. So the next part of the presentation, I wanted to discuss bite-sized. No one has an attention span anymore in 2017. Your hiring managers could be millennials who view and understand information differently than you and I do. And you have to make sure that your resume is concise and easy for them to pick up the key candidates. Also, the average HR person spends about 8 seconds on each resume. So you want to make sure that it's easy to read and very clear. But the point here is to get, with being bite-sized and concise, is to hook the hiring manager or the HR rep into reading more of your resume. Here's an example of how to say it concisely. It used to be in the first resume I showed you, it might say something like manage day-to-day business activities, including answering phones, opening mail, scheduling meetings, updating spreadsheets, and other daily tasks. That showed what you did. It didn't necessarily show what your impact was to the organization. So today I would recommend saying something like manage daily office tasks to create an efficient workplace. What you did is you contributed efficiently to your workplace. And that's really what the hiring manager wants to see. They want to see how you could solve a problem and how you could contribute. And you could contribute to the efficiency by managing your daily office tasks. What you did is not necessarily as important as how you did it. Do you see how you're contributing to the bottom line with the concise statement as opposed to the long-winded one? So the next part of the presentation I wanted to discuss with you is infographics. Infographics are basically visual representations of information, data, or knowledge intended to present information quickly and clearly. It's important to understand that this is appealing to the eye and not necessarily the ATS. Any information that's stated with an infographic needs to be restated elsewhere on your resume, because an ATS is really only picking up MS Word, maybe Excel. It's not picking up visuals, and an infographic is a visual. An infographic is, I'll show you examples of infographic resumes in a second, but an infographic resume is an excellent tool to use if you are able to bypass an ATS by handing a resume to a business associate or a friend to hand in for you. Then your resume might necessarily go through the ATS. In that case, an infographic resume could be powerful and set you apart. It's also another great reason to join something like LinkedIn, where you can sort of network with people and you'd be able to share resumes and share experiences, maybe connect with people using an infographic resume. You would still need two resumes, a resume without infographics and a resume with infographics. When you put a resume in through an ATS, it's almost better that it does not have that many infographic statements. You may be wondering, what can you use an infographic for? They can be, like I said, they can be used for part of the entire resume. I always love an infographic to show sales goals. It's nothing like a spiked line to show how effective you could be. An infographic is a great way to demonstrate your talents and your skills in a bar graph, to demonstrate your education, languages spoken, really everything. And that's sort of what I'm going to show you in a second. You have to understand the brains of millennial hirers think differently. They get icons. It's not your old resume. You're actually marketing yourself to a new generation. So this is the first infographic resume. This is considered pretty cutting edge in the resume world. Very few people have a resume like this, but it's extremely impactful. I love the way Kate just puts her name, her email, and her phone number. I would also mention that you may want to include a LinkedIn profile, but it's very clear the email itself is professional. You always want to have a professional email. You wouldn't want an email that says Kate's mom, or, you know, something. You only want an email that actually uses your name in a professional manner. Immediately, Kate's telling you how she could grow your business. She's branding herself. Top 5 ways Kate can help you grow your business. And this is it. This is what she does. This is how she can make an immediate impact and how she can contribute to your team. She's also setting herself up as a leader. Kate, there's a picture of, there's an icon of Kate and her leadership style. She pretty much puts herself as the ideal leader, able to tightly lead and loosely lead as needed. She's creative and she's also concise. I also want to point out how she shows her expertise. Again, people don't want to necessarily read long lists and long paragraphs. Well, this is when you could use a bar graph. This is a timeline. It shows her year, the years that she's worked, and what years she's worked in what fields. This is really clear, easy to read and understand. I also want to point out that, like I said before, there are no rules with resume writing, and anything could pretty much go if it's done the correct way. But it's a pretty big no-no not to include your references on a resume, but she's done a pretty good job of including impactful statements on a resume. It might be okay to include quotes and recommendations, but I wouldn't necessarily include names and addresses of references on one's resume. Okay. The next resume is for Eva, and I wanted to just really point out again how she's done the skills. You could see that her expertise is in graphic design and how her other skills support the graphic design, but it's very clear what her expertise is. She's displayed the software that she knows with icons, and her interests are also demonstrated in icons. Again, very easy to understand, very clear. Someone could get EVA in about the 8 seconds that an HR representative will take to understand, to read your resume. Keep in mind, these are sort of full examples. It's okay to include perhaps just a skills graph or a sales graph or some icons on your resume. It's okay to use part of an idea of an infographic resume. You don't necessarily need to take the whole thing, the whole concept in. So, specific strategies for stay-at-home moms returning to work. So you're wondering, how do you explain it? My answer to you is that you own it. You write your own narrative. It's real life, and it really does happen. Real life, and this is what you've been doing. You haven't been sitting home doing nothing. You've been taking care of parents and raising your children. You've become a financial manager, a strategist, a budget expert, a professional mover, a facilities manager, an educator, a cook, a negotiator, and conflict resolution expert. Wouldn't your kids like to hear that one? A project manager, building homes and undertaking personal projects of various degrees in your home and in your community. You volunteer. You're meaningfully contributing to your community as an event leader or a board member. And you're a student, constantly obtaining new skills to get the job done at home and for your family. So the first thing is, it's important to own it, but don't give too much information. You can't hide in a resume. It's very hard to hide that you've taken off 10 years, 5 years, even 3 years to raise a family. It's best to explain that you're transitioning to a new part of your life. Your kids are in school full-time and you're no longer caring for those elderly relatives. You could title an entry in your resume, household manager, project manager, professional volunteer, and real-life expert. The bullets should explain how you spent your time, the scope of your projects, and they should include experiences in and out of the house. Too much information would be including personal strife, sickness, and the number of children. By the way, it's illegal to ask about the number of children or your personal life during an interview. This is a sample entry for someone who recently just got her dream job. She's over the last few years, she's built her dream house, and she's been the stay-at-home partner, and she's a professional volunteer. I want to note that this is a gender-neutral entry. Resumes today are largely gender-neutral, so stay-at-home mom would not be as appropriate as stay-at-home partner is. She's contributed to the well-being of her community and family from 2010 to the present. She's a project manager. She spearheaded a huge construction project. She's a professional volunteer. These are all the organizations she's volunteered at. As a stay-at-home partner, she's worked on developed and managed a budget, managed complex scheduling. That's what we call after-school activities, and managing your family calendar. She provided nurturing programming, facilitated conflict resolution, and yes, provided custom and nutritious meals. She's cooked 5 meals in one night for 5 different people to eat dinner. I did want to note that it's important when you're writing your resume to note that all these skills at home that you've developed are transferable to different fields. And that's one of the reasons we want to include them, to show that how you've developed skills and how those skills could transfer to different career options that you're now interested in. So what are your next steps? First, you really need to be sure what type of job you want. It's impossible to write a resume today unless you have a few targeted jobs in mind. Often people ask me, can you write me a general resume? My answer is not well. You really do need to understand where you're going and have a few directions. Will your current resume help you get there? How many resumes do you actually need? Like we said, a resume is highly customizable. Are you interested in pursuing 2 or 3 different avenues? And will 2 or 3 different resumes help you get there more efficiently? Are there experiences that you need to include in your resume? Or are there experiences that you also have to add? Often, people don't want to go back more than 15 years on a resume. So something to consider in the future. Are you comfortable writing your own resume? Even if you are comfortable writing your own resume, you should always have it edited. Any cover letters, resumes, LinkedIn profiles should be edited by an editor or a friend that you trust, but it's always good to have a proofreader. What format would work for you? Do you want to include infographics? How much? Do you want to include color? Do you want to explain where you've worked? What format will exactly work for you? And does the new resume describe the professional you aim to be? Your resume really does need to pick up on the job tasks and qualifications needed for your next step. I do want to thank you for joining me. I write professionally resumes, LinkedIn profiles, cover letters, and bios. If I could help you, please contact me. And Mickey, any questions?
Yes, we have. First of all, thank you, Robin, for a lot of your wonderful tips and a lot of great information. We do have some questions to address. So Maria is asking, when being out of the workforce but having related volunteer experience, is it best to put on your resume, and these are a few possible titles, volunteer experience, work experience, or related experience, and why?
Like I said, it really depends on what the actual experience is, but I would say I would not put it down as work experience, because that doesn't really, if it's not professional work experience. I might put it down as work experience if my experience header does not say professional on it. So you might want to play around with the headers to find what would work honestly. Otherwise, I'd want to integrate experience. You might want to integrate your volunteer and professional experience. Related experience is usually on the bottom of the resume, and they wouldn't see it right away. So I would stay away from that one.
Right. I think that the key there is not misrepresenting something, and I think it really depends how it works with the rest of your resume. And a follow-up question that Maria had is, should the paid employment be before the volunteer experience or the most recent experience at the top?
I would say if your most recent experience relates to what you're doing, what you want to be doing, I would put it on top.
We have a few more questions. Zaina is asking, any suggestions on the best website to develop an infographic resume for a project manager?
I don't. If you want to send me an email, I could get back to you. If I have to create an infographic myself, I do it in Excel, or I actually have a graphic designer do it for me.
Okay, a few more questions. So, I mean, one is asking, who do you use as a reference after being a stay-at-home mom for 6 years, or what type of groups should I be looking for, or volunteer opportunities to help get references?
I would say the first thing you should do is be on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an excellent place to connect with former employers that perhaps you have not spoken to in a while. If you had a friendly relationship and your Facebook profile is pretty clean, I would link them in, I would Facebook them, I would rekindle those relationships, and I would get recent volunteer experience. The easiest place to get volunteer experience is at your local PTO. If you're a parent, the PTO could use a volunteer or two, or any other local organization who would take a volunteer. But an important thing would be to get recent references. I was at a point when I was returning to work that I became a very active volunteer for a year and a half before I returned to the workforce. I was able to get extremely glowing recommendations as a PTO officer, and I really do feel like that helped me get back into the workforce.
I would recommend a couple of other things there. Connect with your previous managers, even if you haven't been in touch for a while, even if they put a recommendation on LinkedIn, that is something, or if somebody does contact them, that they still remember who you are. Invite them for coffee, try and reconnect. We have a couple more questions. Jessica is asking, how many pages is acceptable for a resume?
It definitely could be more than 1 page and less than 3. So if you have a lot of experience, it may be okay to go into that 3rd page, so I wouldn't want to finish it, but 2 is pretty much a good aim.
And the way I also see it, think of your resume as prime real estate, and anything that you are adding, is it really adding value to what you're presenting to the recruiters, or is it just going to be pages and pages of something that is not really adding value to you? We have another question. Maria is asking, is it recommended to put on your resume authorized to work in the US?
That's an interesting question. I don't necessarily think it's necessary unless you think it's going to be a problem for you. I've never put it on a resume. I think it's pretty much assumed. Mickey, do you have any other opinion on that?
Yeah. So I actually I'm working also helping with recruiting. I think especially if your work experience is overseas, or your name, like mine, is a bit of a foreign name, you should add it on, because when recruiters will go through your resume, one of the things that they're going to try and work out is if you're not authorized to work in the US, or they have to sponsor you, that's money out of their pockets. So if you do have that working visa, if you are authorized to work in the US, I've seen it on many resumes up the top, and I do see it as something valuable, because if they'll have 2 candidates that they're looking at, one is authorized and one isn't, you're going to cost them less, so they'll contact you first. And one other question, and we'll make that our last question. Is it a good idea to include your resume on LinkedIn or to keep it separate?
Would you repeat that?
Sure. Is it a good idea to include your resume on LinkedIn or to keep it separate?
There'll be a lot of overlapping information. Usually the job descriptions themselves, those entries, could be the same on LinkedIn and on your resume, but LinkedIn has a lot of room for a tagline and a professional description, and that would be different from the professional description or the tagline on your resume.
Right, so I'm not sure if, Maria, what you mean is like to include your resume on LinkedIn as in to have it as an attachment or something, but again, like Robin said, there's a lot of overlap between them, but what you do want to make sure is that your LinkedIn profile is not completely different to your resume, because recruiters will check your LinkedIn profile and try and see that the overlap.
I think your LinkedIn profile could be a little bit more casual and less formal, and does give you an opportunity to personalize it even a bit more.
I agree. Well, thank you everybody for joining our webinar. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you in our next webinars. And thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Mickey.